The hall felt heavy that day. Not heavy because of noise or crowd, but heavy because of disappointment that had slowly settled into the room. From early morning, people had walked onto the stage with hope in their eyes. Some had confidence, some had fear, some had big dreams, but very few had left any real impact. By the time the day moved toward evening, the excitement that once filled the hall had faded almost completely. The judges had been sitting in the same chairs for hours. At first, they had leaned forward, asked questions, smiled, and clapped politely. But now, their bodies showed signs of tiredness. One judge stretched their shoulders quietly. Another rubbed their forehead and took a slow breath. Their faces weren't angry or rude, just drained. They wanted to see something special, but it felt like that moment might never come. The bright stage lights were still on, shining as strongly as ever, but the energy under those lights was weak. The audience was present, yet distant. Some people whispered softly. Others checked their phones when they thought no one was looking. A few stared at the stage with blank expressions, not expecting much from the next performance. Someone in the crowd quietly yawned. A few heads turned, then quickly looked away. One judge glanced at the schedule on the table and then at the clock on the wall. The day still had performers left, but hope was running low. It felt like one of those days where you wait for something amazing, but deep inside, you already know it may not happen. A voice from the side of the stage called out the next performer. The sound echoed through the hall, but it didn't change much. The judges straightened their backs slightly, out of habit more than excitement. They had trained themselves to stay professional. Even when they were tired and discouraged, then a small child walked onto the stage. At first, the reaction was very quiet. No gasps, no excitement, just a few curious looks. The child was clearly young, much younger than most of the performers that day. Small steps carried the child toward the center of the stage. The lights made the stage look even bigger, and the child looked even smaller standing alone in the middle of it. The child stopped under the lights and looked out at the hall. Hundreds of people were watching. The judges sat only a short distance away, their faces serious, calm, and hard to read. The child's shoulders were slightly tense. Hands were held close to the body, fingers gently touching each other. The nervousness was clear, but it didn't feel fake or dramatic. It felt real, honest. A few people in the audience smiled softly, not because they expected something amazing, but because the child looked brave just standing there. The judges exchanged quick glances. Not cruel glances, not mocking ones, just looks filled with quiet doubt and careful thinking. They had seen many young performers before. Some were pushed by parents. Some loved what they did, but weren't ready yet. Some had confidence far bigger than their skill. One judge leaned forward slightly and spoke in a gentle tone, asking the child to introduce themselves and explain what they planned to do. The child nodded and began to speak. The voice was soft and a little shaky, but clear. Each word came out slowly, as if the child was choosing them carefully. It was clear that speaking in front of so many people was not easy. Still, the child didn't rush. There was respect in the way the words were spoken. When the introduction ended, the judge smiled kindly and nodded. The smile showed encouragement, but behind it was caution. The judges had learned not to expect too much too soon. The signal to begin was given. For a brief moment, nothing happened. The child stood still. The silence stretched out longer than expected. Somewhere in the audience, someone cleared their throat quietly. The child closed their eyes for just a second and took a deep breath. This breath felt different. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't shallow. It was slow and heavy, like the child was gathering courage from somewhere deep inside. When the eyes opened again, something had changed, even if it was very small. Then the performance began. At first, it was simple. Very simple. No loud sound, no sudden movement, no dramatic start. It was calm and quiet, almost blending into the stillness of the room. A few people in the audience shifted in their seats, thinking they already understood how this would go. One judge picked up a pen, ready to make notes, but then, slowly, something began to change. It wasn't something you could point to right away. There was no clear moment where everything suddenly became amazing. Instead, it was a feeling that slowly spread through the room. The child's focus became stronger. The nervous tension in the body began to fade. The judge with the pen paused. The child seemed to forget about the crowd, the cameras, the judges. Everything else disappeared. The stage no longer looked frightening. It looked familiar, almost like a place the child belonged. The audience felt it too. The silence in the room changed. It was no longer bored silence. It became attentive silence. The kind where people are fully present, even if they don't realize it. Phones were lowered, heads lifted. Eyes stayed fixed on the stage. The performance continued, and with each passing moment, the child grew more confident. The posture became stronger. The movement smoother. The voice steadier and clearer. It didn't feel copied or forced. It felt natural, as if the child was simply doing what came from the heart. The judges leaned forward without noticing. One of them rested both hands on the table. Another stopped flipping through notes and watched closely. Eyes focused, the tired expressions from earlier were slowly disappearing. There was a small mistake, a tiny slip that might have gone unnoticed by most people. For a second, it looked like the performance might break. The child hesitated just slightly. The room held its breath. Then the child adjusted and continued. There was no panic, no fear, just calm control. That small recovery spoke louder than any perfect moment could. It showed awareness, strength, confidence beyond years. The audience felt a shift. A quiet respect filled the room. Some people smiled without even knowing why. Others nodded gently, as if encouraging the child silently. The emotion in the performance grew deeper. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't beg for attention. It was calm, steady, and honest. It felt like the child was sharing something real, even if they couldn't fully explain it. One judge's face softened. Another judge nodded slowly, clearly surprised. This was not what they had expected. Earlier that day, the judges had nearly given up hope. They had started to believe that nothing truly memorable would happen. And, Now, an 8-year-old standing under bright lights was slowly changing the mood of the entire hall. The child reached a more difficult part of the performance. Anyone familiar with the skill could see it. The pressure increased. The audience felt it too. The room became tense again, but not with doubt. With anticipation, the child paused briefly. Just a moment. Enough to prepare. Then continued. At that moment, something shifted completely. The nervous child from the beginning was gone. In their place stood someone calm, focused, and fully present. The judges stopped thinking about age. They stopped comparing this performance to others. They weren't thinking about rules or scores. They were simply watching, fully absorbed. The audience felt their hearts beating faster. Some people held their breath without realizing it. A quiet emotion filled the room, the kind that tightens your chest and makes your eyes sting slightly. The child's face showed focus and peace. No rush, no fear. Just control. This was no longer good for a child. This was simply good. One judge slowly shook their head, a look of disbelief on their face. Another pressed their lips together, clearly moved but trying to remain professional. They had seen talent before, but moments like this were rare. The performance continued to build. Slowly, carefully, every second felt important. Every movement felt meaningful. The audience was completely silent now. Even the smallest sound felt out of place. The judges, who had once been tired and ready to give up, were now fully awake. As the child approached the most challenging part, the emotion in the room grew heavier. It felt like something important was about to happen. Something people would remember long after the day ended. The child took another steady breath and moved forward. The camera slowly captured the judges' faces, surprise, respect, a quiet understanding that they were witnessing something special. The audience leaned forward. Together, no one looked away. No one blinked. The room felt like it was holding its breath. And right there, just before everything reached its peak, the moment hung in the air, leaving everyone waiting, wondering and feeling something they hadn't felt all day. The room stayed completely silent for a moment longer. It felt as if time itself had slowed down. No one moved. No one spoke. Everyone was still holding their breath after what they had just witnessed. The child stood on the stage, calm and steady, as if the noise, the bright lights, and the pressure no longer existed. It was like the world around had faded, leaving only that small figure standing in the center. For a brief second, the child looked out at the audience. Not nervously this time, not with fear, but with quiet awareness. The eyes were clear, focused, and calm. The body language showed balance, as if the child had finally found a place that felt right. Then the final part of the performance began. This time, there was no hesitation at all. No shaking hands. No nervous pause. The child moved forward with quiet confidence, fully present in the moment. It was clear to everyone now that this was not luck. This was not a coincidence. This was something built over time. Something earned through patience, long hours of practice, small failures, and a deep love for what they were doing. The audience felt it instantly. A deep emotion spread through the hall, moving from seat to seat like a soft wave. Some people felt their throats tighten without knowing why. Others felt a strange warmth in their chest. It wasn't excitement in the usual sense. It was something more meaningful. No one felt bored. No one felt distracted. Every eye stayed fixed on the stage, as if looking away would break the moment. The judges watched closely, no longer as critics or decision-makers, but as witnesses to something rare. One judge leaned forward, resting their chin on their hand, eyes wide with focus. Another judge sat perfectly still, hands folded together, completely absorbed. The tiredness that had once filled their faces was gone. In its place was respect, curiosity, and quiet admiration. The child reached the most difficult part of the performance. The kind of moment that usually breaks performers under pressure. The kind where hands shake, voices slip, or confidence disappears. The hall felt tense again, but this time it was a hopeful tension. Everyone wanted the child to succeed. Everyone was silently cheering. The child took a slow, steady breath, then continued. The movement, the voice, the expression, everything came together in a way that felt natural and honest. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. There was no effort to impress. It was controlled, clean, and full of meaning. The child wasn't performing for applause anymore. They were simply expressing something real. And that honesty reached everyone. Few people in the audience quietly wiped their eyes, surprised by their own emotions. Others smiled without realizing it. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't pure happiness either. It was something deeper. A reminder of effort, of courage, of believing in yourself even when others doubt you. A reminder of how powerful quiet confidence can be. The judges felt it too. One of them slowly nodded, almost to themselves, as if saying, "This is real." Another judge took a deep breath, clearly moved but trying to stay composed and professional. Their expressions said more than words ever could. As the performance moved closer to the end, the child's confidence never wavered. There was no rush to finish. No sign of fear, just calm focus. It felt like the child truly belonged on that stage, as if this moment had been waiting for them. The room stayed completely still. Then the final moment arrived. The child finished with a simple, powerful ending. No extra movement, no added drama. Just a clean finish that said everything without saying anything at all. The final note, the final movement, lingered in the air for a second longer than expected, for one quiet moment. The hall stayed silent. Then the applause exploded. People stood up without thinking. Chairs moved. Hands clapped loudly from every direction. Some people cheered openly. Others clapped with tears in their eyes. The sound was loud, but it felt warm, not chaotic. It was full of respect, admiration, and shared emotion. The child stood still on the stage, eyes wide in surprise. It took a moment to understand what was happening. The applause didn't stop. It only grew stronger. Slowly, a shy smile appeared on the child's face. A real smile. Not practiced. Not forced. Just pure disbelief mixed with happiness. The judges stood up too. One judge clapped slowly at first, then faster, smiling as if they couldn't help themselves. Another judge shook their head with a smile, clearly amazed by how wrong their first impression had been. The third judge pressed a hand to their chest, quietly taking in the moment. When the applause finally began to settle, the room felt different, lighter, brighter, as if something heavy had been lifted from everyone's shoulders. One judge leaned forward and spoke. The voice was calm, but filled with emotion. They admitted honestly that earlier in the day they had almost lost hope. They had started to believe that nothing special would happen. Then they looked at the child and smiled. "You reminded us why we sit here," the judge said softly. "You reminded us why we believe in talent." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Another judge spoke next. They talked about how difficult it is to stay confident under pressure, especially at such a young age. They praised not just the performance itself, but the calmness, the focus, and the courage behind it. They explained how rare it is to see someone so young handle such a moment with grace. The third judge stayed quiet for a moment longer than expected. Then they spoke softly, choosing their words carefully. They said that moments like this don't happen often. That what they had just seen was not only skill, but heart. And heart, they said, is something that cannot be taught easily. The child listened quietly, eyes shining, trying hard to stay calm while emotions rushed in. The hands were still slightly trembling now, but not from fear, from happiness, from relief. This was more than praise. This was validation. The decision came next. The judges shared their final words together, and the answer was clear. There was no hesitation. The child had not only succeeded, but had changed the mood of the entire day. A moment that started with doubt had ended with belief. The audience clapped again, even louder this time. The child covered their mouth for a second, overwhelmed by everything happening at once. Then the child smiled and nodded slightly, as if trying to say thank you to everyone at the same time. As the child walked off the stage, the steps were lighter than before. The nervous walk from the beginning was completely gone. In its place was quiet confidence, strong and steady. Behind the scenes, staff members smiled at each other. Some whispered softly, knowing they had just witnessed something special. Moments like this were the reason they worked long hours, the reason they stayed patient through difficult days. The judges sat back down, but they were not the same as before. Their posture had changed. Their energy had changed. They were awake again, inspired, hopeful. The audience settled too, but the feeling stayed. People talked quietly among themselves about what they had just seen. Some said it gave them chills. Others said it reminded them of dreams they once had, dreams they had almost forgotten. The child's performance stayed in the air long after it ended. Later that day, as the lights dimmed and the hall slowly emptied, the judges reflected on what had happened. They remembered how close they were to giving up hope, how tired they had felt, how ready they were to simply get through the day without expecting anything memorable. And then an 8-year-old walked in and changed everything. It wasn't about age. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about trying to be the best. It was about courage, about staying true to yourself even when fear is loud, about showing up fully even when the world expects nothing. That single moment reminded everyone of something important. Hope can return at any time. Talent doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it walks in quietly with shaking hands and a brave heart, and sometimes the smallest person on the stage leaves the biggest impact.